1969. There are 7 months left to land a man on the moon before 1970. The mighty Saturn V rockets are being built, 2 at a time. 3 crews are training for the Apollo 11 mission. Armstrong and Aldrin will attempt in July. If they fail, Conrad and Bean will make a go in August, and if they fail, Lovell and Hayes will attempt in December. There is one final test flight NASA believes it must make before it is ready to take the LEM to the surface. Apollo 10 will be a dress rehearsal for the Apollo 11 mission. For the first time in NASA's history, there will be 2 separate spacecraft operating in lunar orbit. The commander and lunar module pilot will undock from the command and service module in orbit around the moon and light its engine for a landing, and then purposefully abort the landing halfway through. Gaining operational experience around the moon is a key objective of Apollo 10.
Every time there is another Apollo mission, we say that it is the most demanding yet, because every time there's another Apollo mission, that happens to be true. Each mission is planned as another step toward the ultimate goal of landing a man on the moon. To those on the outside, each mission is an heroic adventure, demanding man's courage and his curiosity, and that happens to be true too. But like all great adventures, each mission counts on scientific techniques and complicated hardware. Apollo 10, counting down tonight for a launch on Sunday afternoon, marks the first time that the complete Apollo spacecraft will operate around the moon. And the mission's going to go like this. After that launch, Sunday afternoon, the spacecraft will go into a 115-mile orbit around the Earth. On the second orbit, over on the far side from where I am, over the Pacific Ocean, the third stage of the great Saturn rocket will propel it an extra 10,000 feet per second to a speed of 25,000 miles an hour to escape Earth's gravity. And out here at about 10,000 miles, the command module will separate, turn around, withdraw the lunar excursion module from the third stage, and then they'll be on their own on this long trip, 235,000 miles out to the moon. They'll reach there 3 days later.
The previous mission to the moon, Apollo 8, spent a meager 20 hours, all of them in a single spacecraft. Apollo 10 hopes to spend nearly 40 hours, 10 of those with 2 active spacecraft flying in lunar orbit. The crew of Apollo 10 are all veterans of spaceflight. Gene Cernan, lunar module pilot, flew into space with the commander of Apollo 10, Tom Stafford, on Gemini 9. Stafford himself also flew into space on Gemini 6. The pair will get lower to the lunar surface than ever before, flying 13 miles above the lunar surface at 3,000 miles per hour. The command module pilot, the third member of the crew, will become the first man to be alone in lunar orbit, spending almost 9 hours in solitary isolation within the confines of the command module. This job goes to John Young, who has flown into space twice before, once on Gemini 3 and again on Gemini 10. Cernan and Stafford will enter the LEM, rehearse a landing abort, and then rendezvous back with Young just over 8 hours later. This 8-hour event is just a fraction of the crew's total stay time around the moon, however. They will be taking extensive photographic and video film coverage of the moon to provide the best possible detail and surveying data for future landing missions. Apollo 10 is the final piece of the lunar puzzle. On May 18, 1969, Stafford, Cernan, and Young are given a go for launch. More than 220,000 people come over from all over the United States to watch the launch of Apollo 10. It will be the first mission in history where live color television is broadcasted from space. Included in the launch viewing audience are the crews of Apollo 11, 12, and 13, the administrator of NASA, the vice president, and the Saturn V chief designer, Wernher von Braun.
At one time, actually, Apollo 10 was in line to be the first landing. And Tom Stafford could have been the first man on the moon. And that would have been perfectly fine, and I would have been the second, and that would have been perfectly fine. In retrospect, quite frankly, I'm sort of glad the way it worked out. the way it did, because Apollo 17 was a whole other story. But our mission eventually was to go ahead and do everything Apollo 11 was supposed to do. Go down to 8 miles above the surface, 47,000 feet, test the radar, test the landing gear, do the rendezvous, separate the spacecraft, separate them in space the way they would separate on the surface of the moon, just make sure everything worked. I tell Neil Armstrong that we painted the white line in the sky so we wouldn't get lost. He's heard that from me enough where he's beginning to believe it, I think.
This is Apollo Saturn launch control, T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. The Apollo access arm, swing arm number 9, now fully retracted to its fallback position, some 60 feet away from the spacecraft. At liftoff, we will have some 5 swing arms still attached. They will move back automatically at first motion, some 3/4 of an inch after the vehicle takes off. Astronaut Tom Stafford has completed his checks with the spacecraft test conductor. The mission director, George Hage, and the launch director, Rocco Petrone, have given a go for the flight, as has the range. We've now passed the 4-minute mark and proceeding satisfactorily. We are go. This is launch control. We're coming up on the 60-second mark. 60 seconds and counting. We are go for a mission to the moon at this time. The second stage tanks now pressurizing, and we're coming up on the power transfer. 50 seconds and counting. We have now switched to internal power satisfactorily on the batteries of the first stage, all 3 stages of the Saturn V vehicle. 40 seconds and counting. Tom Stafford making a final check of his computer. The vehicle, all stages pressurized at this time. We're waiting for the swing arms to come back. One should be coming back this time, the second one at 17 seconds. Tom Stafford reports they are go. We're coming up at the 20-second mark. T-minus 20 seconds and counting. 17 seconds and counting. Guidance internal. 15, 14, 15, 12, 11, 10, 9. We have a mission sequence start. Engines on. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines running. Launch command for liftoff. We have liftoff. 29 minutes past the hour. We have already lost our side. The tower is clear. We're going.
Tom Stafford acknowledging the roll and pitch program for Apollo 10 on the proper course.
Okay, this is tracking looking good. Roll complete, ELS ready. Roger, roll. Can't get the mark for 1 Bravo. Roger, 1 Bravo.
1 Bravo is an abort mode dealing with altitude, function of altitude.
A little bit in there.
Plus 55 seconds. Cabin pressure is relieving. Downrange 1 mile, 3.3 nautical miles high.
Apollo 10 orbits the Earth for 2.5 hours, checking out systems and ensuring the vehicle is ready for the burn to the moon. Just over Australia, the Saturn V's third stage reignited, and Apollo 10 was on its way towards the moon. With pinpoint accuracy, Apollo 10's onboard guidance computer shut the engine down precisely on schedule. The 5.5-minute burn had accelerated the spacecraft to nearly 25,000 miles per hour. Stafford, Young, and Cernan were headed for the moon.
Roger, 10. You'll go for TLI. S4B is looking as planned.
Booster engineer says the Saturn is go.
Right on time. Roger, copy. Fuel lead, Mr. Stafford. Get
acceleration.
Roger.
Slide on.
Roger.
We're burning.
Roger,
Slide
burning.
on. We're on the way.
Roger, we confirm.
Unlike Apollo 8, now was not the time to relax. As soon as a stable link of communication was established over Hawaii, the crew prepared to separate the CSM from the third stage, perform an about-face, and dock with the lunar module. The command and service module of Apollo 10 was christened Charlie Brown by the crew, and the lunar module, still nestled within the third stage of the Saturn V, was nicknamed Snoopy. Cernan and Stafford began filming as command module pilot Young took the controls. Behind them, the Earth grew smaller by the minute.
10, Houston, we'll have you AOS now till you get to LOS at the moon.
Sounds like Chris has got pretty good coverage.
Yes, sir. He's sitting back there smiling.
You got to see us.
Chris says ain't no backing out now.
That's for sure.
Hey, we got the S4B coming into the top. The sun's really shining on it. Okay, I'll try adjusting for you. You're on the air, babe.
Closer and closer the LEM became. Watching his position, John Young carefully slid the nose of the command and service module probe into the drogue of the LEM, and the two spacecraft of Apollo 10 became one.
Snap, snap, and we're there. Got 2 grays.
Roger. You saw the docket, Charlie.
You can play our favorite song, Charlie. The one about fly me someplace or somewhere.
Right.
Fly
up to you.
me to the moon. Let me play.
You see any resemblance
among
between the card and the guy holding the card?
Let me see what
now that you
spring's
mentioned it.
like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words,
Does he carry the briefcase?
hold my hand.
Roger. Good grief, Charlie Brown.
In other words,
Now you're going to bring on that
baby,
wizard here.
kiss me.
Okay, we got Snoopy now.
Fill my heart with song and let me sing
One of our problems is
forevermore.
trying to figure out which way is up
You
and which way is down.
are all I long
And I feel for one time you have
all
your
I
choice. You
worship
don't like things right
and
side up, you
adore.
go upside down.
In other words,
Roger, down here. Okay, we got one of you in each direction. Still good color?
in other words,
Yes, indeed.
I love you.
You might notice the dynamics here. I just do whatever he says. Hey, Tom, the flight surgeon here wants you to be sure to log all your exercise. I got you.
7 hours after launch, the crew had settled down into the art of living in space. Floating around the interior of their craft, the 3 astronauts quickly became glued to the windows as they watched their home planet sink away into the vastness of space.
Hey, boy, that is really fantastic. We can pick out Baja and the smog over L.A., and we see Mexico, and we go off to the east in our picture and come into the Rockies area. The Baja California and the Gulf area really stand out beautiful.
Okay, we'll move it around.
Looks like we got some clouds down over New Orleans and down in that way.
Yep.
That's right. Sure is.
Okay, Charlie, that's full zoom.
Okay, this has got to be the greatest sight ever.
You ought to see it up here.
Hey, Tom, boy, it is really fantastic. Could you get Baja in a little bit? We're showing the Pacific now.
Charlie, this is it's so hard to describe. You can go right up past Alaska, and you can see the polar caps. It's incredible.
Well, we see it all here, Gene. Its colors are really beautiful.
That's great. And the blackest black that you ever could conceive is the setting for all this.
Right.
Looks like all around the people in New York have a little bit of cloud cover there. It goes all the way down, back by the Cape.
Right.
Right there, you should be able to see the United States, Mexico, Baja.
Hey, it's really beautiful, Tom. It's coming in great.
You ought to see it up here, Charlie.
We got the whole globe there.
Yeah, you're looking right at the United States.
Right.
See the Rocky Mountains sticking out, Baja, California. Can't tell whether you have any smog in L.A. or not. But Alaska's pretty much socked in.
Right. It's really a beautiful picture.
We'll just let it go here for a couple minutes.
Okay, thanks.
The second and third day of Apollo 10 passed by uneventfully. A small mid-course burn had occurred 28 hours after launch, and the crew zipped through space, aiming for a point only 80 miles above the lunar surface, some 200,000 miles away.
You are now, for the first time, seeing what has never been seen by human eyes. You are now where human beings have never been before. It becomes the most quiet moment of your life. You have to reconcile with that. It's something that you pinch yourself. Am I really here? And that's home. That's the real Earth. That's where you live. That's where life and love and past and history, your history, is.
Blue, the only blue thing, right?
You know, the multicolored blues of the ocean and snow of the clouds, the white of the clouds and the snow. You see a three-dimensional Earth. It's dynamic. It's alive. It rotates on an axis. Every 12 hours, you're looking at the other side of the world. You look from North Pole to South Pole. You look across oceans and continents.
Apollo 10 coasted on silently towards the moon. At 75 hours into the mission, the crew disappeared behind the far side and lit their CSM engine for the LOI burn, lunar orbit insertion, to slow down and enter orbit of the moon. Following a brief TV broadcast showing the lunar surface in full color, Stafford and Cernan drifted into Lunar Module Snoopy and undocked from John in the command module Charlie Brown. They initiated a retro-fire burn that had inserted them into an elliptical 80 by 13 mile orbit, with the lowest point crossing directly over the landing site for Apollo 11.
Apollo 10, Houston, 2 minutes to LOS. Everybody here says Godspeed.
Okay, and we'll see them right on the other side in orbit.
Roger, 762255.
As they came scooting above the lunar surface, they watched the mountains under them fly by at amazing speed.
But I'll tell you one thing, when we went over, we made 2 passes over the landing site, and I tell you what, I think I said things that, boy, we are down among them. I felt like I had to pick up my feet to keep from dragging on top of the mountains. I mean, we were close, and we're going over those hills at 3,000 miles an hour. So you can just imagine what that was like, and it was one of those quick touch and goes. We didn't have a chance to put our tail hook down to stay, but and that would have been the big part of the challenge. Nonetheless, we were only the second flight to go to the moon, the first to take the lunar module, and it was the right decision to be made to get everything done. And we found some problems that had we attempted to land might have kept us from landing, and then paved the way for Apollo 11 to go ahead and successfully land. So it was the right decision at the right time.
As Stafford and Cernan blew the descent stage off the lunar module, John awaited them high above in the command module, watching their every move.
Okay, Charlie Brown and Snoop, 3 minutes going over the hill. Your go for undocking, and we'll see you around the other side.
Roger. Roger. We just can't believe what we're seeing. I tell you, Joe, this satellite of ours, this moon of ours, had a rough beginning somewhere back there. I tell you, we're down here where we can touch the top of some hills, though. Hello, Houston, Houston, this is Snoopy.
Right, Snoop, go ahead.
We is going, we is down among them, Charlie.
Roger, I hear you weaving your way up the freeway.
Roger, fantastic, Charlie, fantastic.
Roger.
Charlie, babe, it's fantastic, babe, really. Houston, Houston, Charlie Brown. They're down there among the rocks, mumbling about the boulders and things right now. Oh, Charlie, we just saw Earthrise, and it's got to be magnificent. Charlie, I don't know how the big man must see things, but if his view is any better than ours, it's got to be fantastic.
However, as Snoopy rose up to a rendezvous with Charlie Brown, it immediately jerked 45 degrees to the left, throwing Stafford and Cernan around inside. The cause was determined to be an erroneous attitude entered into the lunar module guidance computer. When it was switched from descent to ascent mode, the computer noticed that it was facing the wrong way and quickly assumed the new attitude. It did so at a high rate of speed, heedless of the two helpless occupants inside. A small programming error, but potentially fatal in the case of an abort where time is critical. It would be fixed for Apollo 11.
They're out of there, babe. And that's that last attitude.
Snoop, Houston, we show you close to Gimmellock.
Yeah, okay, something went wild there on that staging. And we're all set. We didn't lock it. We're going ahead to the autumn.
Charlie Brown, Houston, they got staging. They had a wild gyration, though, but they got it under control.
The incident delayed docking by one lunar orbit, roughly 2 hours. However, John Young filmed as Stafford and Cernan finally approached in the ascent stage of the lunar module. Everything had worked perfectly.
Houston, this is Snoop. Charlie Brown's trying to call you.
Roger, Snoop. We don't read him. Charlie Brown, verify your S-band switches in TR, over.
John, is your S-band switch in TR, and I'll give you anything you need. Just ask. Go ahead.
Snoopy, Houston, it's a ground.
Okay.
Snoopy, Houston, I'm breaking in. It's a ground problem with the CSM. We're losing it. We got the downlink to Goldstone, but we're not getting it here in the MCC.
Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you, this column has got to be fixed in the next couple hours, Charlie, so tell them to get with it.
Roger.
Everything else is going good here. Houston, it's Snoopy. Is that 69.2 by 57.5 good?
Stand by.
As lunar module Snoopy was jettisoned for the final time, again, an incorrect attitude was entered into its guidance computer. Instead of depleting the rest of its fuel to slow down and place it on a crash course with the moon, it fired its rocket in the opposite direction, speeding up and entering into a permanent, solitary orbit of the sun. It was inconsequential, as the 3 astronauts were now safely reunited back in Command Module Charlie Brown, and all mission objectives had been accomplished. Snoopy is still out there somewhere, an icy relic of the golden age of manned spaceflight. 38 hours after entering lunar orbit, the crew of Apollo 10 emerged a final time behind the far side of the moon.
There's the word AOS flight. We have telemetry data. We're standing by for voice communications from the Apollo 10 crew.
Hello, Houston, Apollo 10.
Hello, Apollo 10, this is Houston. How'd the burn go?
Roger, Houston, we are returning to the Earth. Over.
Glad to have you on the way back home, 10.
Roger, the bird was absolutely beautiful, and Geo has a report, and we've got a fantastic view of the moon now. Over.
Mighty fine, Tom. Standing by for that report.
Houston, the TV's being turned on now, and as Tom starting your pan, we have a couple quick short words for you.
Roger, we're standing by. Go ahead.
Everybody, put me down. I'm a face without a name.
Just walking back to Houston. I got holes in both of my shoes while I'm a walking case of the blues. Saw a dog.
You guys are really hauling the mail out of there. Oh, you better believe it. It's like we're climbing straight out, Joe. It's a fantastic sight. It's like we were shot straight out to the center of the moon.
You're going about 6,000 feet a second.
Okay, that's the picture we have now. You can see we're probably rolling way out close to 3,000 miles now. It's still a beautiful view. Back and look at you, look like we've come a long ways in a few years. You can just imagine where we're going to go in a few more years, over.
Roger that, Tom.
That initial climb out was just fantastic, Jack. And like we were telling Joe earlier, it's a good thing we approached the moon from the other way, because if you could approach it from this way straight going like that, you'd have to shut your eyes, over.
Going back to Houston, Houston, Houston. I got a girl waiting out for me. Well, at least she said she'd be. I got a home and a big warm bed and a feather pillow for my head. We're going back to Houston, Houston, Houston.
As the crew approached the Earth, they made their final TV transmissions, and on May 26, they re-entered Earth's atmosphere at the highest speed ever achieved by living humans. Thanks to the efforts of the crew of Apollo 10, the moon was finally in our reach.
Roger 10, this is Houston. We copied that transmission. Thank you.
This view has got to be a fantastic thing. That's what the average space navigator looks like after 543 marks. You can observe the patch over one eye to help him adapt.
Roger, you really got to talk broken out there down the motor.
Hello, Dean. How about saying a few words into the microphone? Okay, Jack. I can't tell you what a rewarding and satisfying experience this has been. It's had its moments, as I said. I'm just thankful that through the medium of television we've been able to share it with so many people in real time. I'm convinced after this mission, none of them are going to be easy, but nothing is impossible, and I think the future of manned spaceflight from now and for many generations to come is going to uncover many, many other new challenges and experiences that we yet are really incapable of even conceiving at this time. It's been a great 8 days. Of course, we're looking forward to get home, and I guess next time we'll be talking to you and seeing you. We'll be back on the ground. Thank you.
Mark entry interface. Velocity 36,331, still increasing. Downrange to splash point 1,315 nautical miles.
Apollo 10 had been a complete and total dress rehearsal for what would be required to land on a foreign celestial body, with the exception of the landing itself. It Its crew had recovered more orbital data than any previous robotic mission, and the high-definition maps of the lunar surface created as a result of this data allowed future crews to focus solely on the landing itself. After Apollo 10's success, a total of 3 moon rockets, 6 spacecraft, and 9 men now stood by to fly to the moon on the drop of a hat, ready to attempt the first lunar landing. The world waited and held its breath as NASA began the countdown for the most famous spaceflight in human history.